not too long ago purchased a house in West Austin on some property, and it's gonna be interesting because there's already owls and all types of songbirds there that it'll be fun watching them.
All right.
I'm looking forward to it.
Nice. You know, we have so many bird watchers. All right. Well, welcome, dear friends. Welcome, everyone.
Yeah, the devotions is getting away from you, Chris. You better step in and take control.
Yeah, I just don't want to start talking because I've been going to Inks Lake a couple of times recently, and I saw a ton of birds, so I actually can get in on this action. so
we can just do this till noon if you want.
I know, right? I know. But actually, I should say the other day, Turner and I went to a park and we saw like a falcon or something eat another bird right there, right in front of us. And I was like, well, Turner, here's the cycle of life. You get to see it firsthand. The big poof of feathers went up.
Wow.
There you go. He took it much better than I did, actually. He was like, oh, that bird's eating. I was like, yeah.
Yeah, everybody's got to eat.
Yeah. So fantastic. All right. Well, let's see here. Yeah, we do have a local. I don't know if we have the YouTube talk of her talk with Tanya Humayun as a degree in ornithology. So she had talked about the environment, impacting the environment. I'm going to try to get her to talk again about that kind of stuff, how it relates to birds. It's amazing. So we'll talk about that soon. All right, dear friends. Well, welcome to our devotions and fireside. I have a devotion here. Let me see. I'll share it. So I'm not going to. I'm just going to let people unmute themselves and read. It starts with the song, and after that, you just feel free when your heart feels moved, and you can read a prayer. So let's start with our song.
Wert thou to consider this world and realize how fleeting are the things that pertain unto it, thou wouldst choose to tread no path, to tread no path, to tread no path, except the path of service to the cause of thy Lord, 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 to the cause of thy Lord. None would have the power to deter thee from celebrating his praise, though all men should arise to oppose thee, though all men should arise to oppose thee. Oh, thou wouldst choose to tread no path, to tread no path, to tread no path, except the path of service to the cause of thy Lord, 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 to the cause of thy Lord. Say, O people, the day promised unto you in all the scriptures is now come. Fear ye God, and withhold not yourselves from recognizing the one who is the object of your creation. None would have the power to deter thee from celebrating his praise, though all men should arise to oppose thee, though all men should arise to oppose thee. Oh, thou wouldst no path except the path of service to the cause of thy Lord, 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 the cause of thy Lord. Hasten to him, hasten to him. Better is this for you than the world and all that is therein. Hasten to him, hasten to him. Better is this for you than the world and all that is therein.
O thou kind Lord, thou hast created all humanity from the same stock. Thou hast decreed that all shall belong to the same household. Thou art kind to all. Thou providest for all, dost shelter all, conferrest life upon all. Thou hast endowed each and all with talents and faculties, and all are submerged in the ocean of thy mercy. O thou kind Lord, unite all, let the religions agree, and make the nations one, so that they may see each other as one family, and the whole earth as one home. May they all live together in perfect harmony. Cement thou, O God, the hearts together. O thou kind Father God, gladden our hearts through the fragrance of thy love. Brighten our eyes through the light of thy guidance. Delight our ears with the melody of thy word, and shelter us all in the stronghold of thy providence.
My
My
house.
house.
Sorry, go ahead, Nabil.
No, I'm sorry. My house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples.
Meet together, speak together, let your minds be of one accord, as the gods of old, being of one mind, accepted their share of the sacrifice. May your counsel be common, your assembly common the mind, and the thoughts of these united. A common purpose do I lay before you, and worship with your common oblation. Let your aims be common and your hearts of one accord, and all of you be of one mind, so you may live well together.
The purpose of religion, as revealed from the heaven of God's holy will, is to establish unity and concord amongst the peoples of the world. Make it not the cause of dissension and strife. The religion of God and his divine law are the most potent instruments and the surest of all means for the dawning of the light of unity amongst men. The progress of the world, the development of the nations, the tranquility of the peoples, and the peace of all who dwell on earth are among the principles and ordinances of God. Baha'u'llah.
Every kingdom divided against itself is laid waste, and no city or house divided against itself will stand.
My children, war, fear, and disunity have brought you from your villages to this sacred council fire. Facing a common danger and fearing for the lives of your families, you have yet drifted apart, each tribe thinking and acting only for itself. Remember how I took you from one small band and nursed you into many nations? You must reunite now and act as one. My children, listen well. Remember that you are brothers, that the downfall of one means the downfall of all. You must have one fire, one pipe. Native American, Hiawatha, Iroquois.
He who lets fly his weapon against the innocent, an enemy of my faith, the destroyer of thy principles is he, O Lord. Zoroastrianism. Anun aveti gata. Yasana 32:10.
When the struggles of this earthly life, they seem too hard to bear. If your dreams turn into ashes and you feel like no one cares, just remember that you're not alone. Gentle winds of love surround you. And even if you're far from home, they're always there, 'cause it's alright, it's okay, it's alright, you'll find a way. Sometimes you just feel like you're not where you're meant to be. But in time, these tests will help expose your true nobility. The lights of this universe are all around you. Stars surround you night and day as you toil and carry onward. I know they'll guide your way. The lights of this universe are all around you. They surround you night and day as you toil and carry onward. I know they'll show you the way, 'cause it's alright, it's okay, it's alright, you'll find your way, 'cause it's alright, it's okay. Gentle winds of love will show you
All right, dear friends, that concludes the prepared portion of the devotions. So now I open it up to anyone who would like to say a prayer.
Praise be thou, O Lord my God. Sanctify mine ears and my tongue and my heart and my heart and my spirit and my soul and my body and my all entire being from turning to anyone but thee. Give me then to drink from the cup that brimeth with the sealed wine of thy glory. Baha'u'llah.
Glory be to thee, O King of eternity, and the maker of nations, and the fashioner of every moldering bone. I pray thee by thy name, through which thou didst call all mankind unto the horizon of thy majesty and glory, and didst guide thy servants to the court of thy grace and favors, to number me with such as have rid themselves from everything except thyself, and have set themselves towards thee, and have been kept back by such misfortunes as were decreed by thee, from turning in the direction of thy gifts. I laid hold, O my Lord, on the handle of thy bounty, and clung steadfastly to the hem of the robe of thy favor. Send down then upon me out of the clouds of thy generosity what will purge out of me the remembrance of anyone except thee, and make me able to turn unto him who is the object of adoration of all mankind, against whom have been arrayed the stirs of sedition, who have broken thy covenant and disbelieved in thee and thy signs. Deny me not, O my Lord, the fragrances of the raiment of thy days, and deprive me not of the breathings of thy revelation, at the appearance of the splendors of the light of thy face. Powerful art thou to do what pleaseth thee. Naught can resist thy will, nor frustrate what thou hast purposed by thy power. No God is there but thee, the Almighty, the All-Wise. Baha'u'llah.
This is a prayer for the youth, as many are completing their school years and through difficult times, that they have a lot to look forward to. O thou kind Lord, graciously bestow a pair of heavenly wings unto each of these fledglings, and give them spiritual power, that they may wing their flight through this limitless space, and may soar to the heights of the Apa kingdom. O Lord, strengthen these fragile seedlings, that each one may become a fruitful tree, verdant and flourishing. Render these souls victorious through the potency of thy celestial hosts, that they may be able to crush the forces of error and ignorance, and to unfurl the standard of fellowship and guidance amidst the people. that they may, even as the reviving breaths of the spring, refresh and quicken the trees of human souls, and like unto vernal showers, make the meads of that region green and fertile. Thou art the mighty and the powerful. Thou art the bestower and the all-loving.
Oh, compassionate God, thanks be to thee. Oh, compassionate God, thanks be to thee. For thou hast awakened and made me conscious. Thou hast given me a seeing eye and favored me with a hearing ears, hast led me to thy kingdom and guided me to thy path. Thou hast shown me the right way and caused me to be steadfast in thy covenant. Thou art the powerful, thou art the seeing. Thou art the powerful, thou art the hearing.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for those wonderful devotions. Well, today we have a special treat. We have Dr. Chris Johnson, who I can confidently say is the most intelligent Chris in this meeting here, will be leading us in our discussion. For those of you who don't know Chris Johnson and haven't interacted with him, Chris Johnson is a professor of sociology, right?
Mhm.
At Texas State University. He originally hails from Iowa, right? Iowa State University. He has a degree in gerontology, right? And
Yep.
aging, and he runs a program on dementia. So he is a fascinating person to talk to. He also has a good background in social psychology. So if you ever get to talk about social psychology in a setting with him, he is a great person to have around, loves to talk about that kind of thing. So he's always fascinating. And he actually is wonderful to talk about relationships as well. So he's a man of many talents and many interests. He also has a great grasp of the history of the Baha'i faith as well. So it's always a joy and a pleasure to have him around. So thank you so much, Chris. Before you were here, you were in Louisiana, correct?
Yes, I was at University of Louisiana Monroe as director of their gerontology program there for 25 years. And
Nice.
then I retired when my wife got breast cancer. She was commuting back and forth from Monroe to Scotland, University of Stirling, to get her doctorate in dementia studies. And she came down with breast cancer. And so I retired to move over there with her permanently instead of having her had to commute back and forth. And we lived there 2 years. So kind of consider that semi-pioneering as well. There was a wonderful Baha'i community in Stirling. The Scottish are amazing people, very open-minded. I was amazed and was so grateful to have that experience as well. My great-great-grandfather actually got his degree from University of Edinburgh, butter, like you put on bread. So anyway, it was a great experience to teach there, and I just got chills in my spine thinking of back in the mid 1800s, My great grandfather Baxter actually went to school there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's weird how God places you in these different situations in your life, isn't it?
Nice. Yes, yes. That is an amazing. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to help lead the discussion today. I think most of us here realize we were talking about the prosperity of humankind, and looking at this important document and how it relates to our current situation in life and society. So, Chris, are you going to share your screen? Do you want to share the document yourself, or what was your?
I can. Okay, so I'll try it here.
Yeah. If not, I can share it as well if you want me to.
Okay.
Whichever works.
Let's see if I can pull it up. Try to find it here. You want to pull it up?
Sure. What paragraph do you want to start at?
Where Hotan left off, starting, I guess, 1, right? Section 1.
Let's see. All right. Is it the bedrock? Is that the one? Let me see. Let's see here. So is it this right here? Is this where you want to start?
Yes, that's
The bedrock.
it. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, sweet.
Okay, who would like to begin this reading? And we're in no hurry, to rush through this because this is pretty heavy stuff here. So I'm going to be interested in hearing people's comments about each paragraph because there's so much to each paragraph.
I can start out if you want me to.
Okay, Laura.
Okay. The bedrock of a strategy that can engage the world's population in assuming responsibility for its collective destiny must be the consciousness of the oneness of humankind. Deceptively simple in popular discourse, the concept that humanity constitutes a single people presents fundamental challenges to the way that most of the institutions of contemporary society carry out their functions. Whether in the form of the adversarial structure of civil government, the advocacy principle informing most of civil law, a glorification of the struggle between classes and other social groups, or the competitive spirit dominating so much of modern life, conflict is accepted as the mainspring of human interaction. It represents yet another expression in social organization of the materialistic interpretation of life that has progressively consolidated itself over the past 2 centuries. You want me to stop right there?
Yes, if you would. Let's pick apart this paragraph here. Sociologists talk about the current situation in America of what they call radical individualism. That's a very powerful term. Radical individualism versus collectivism, where one person's rights become more important than the group. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, Chris, I'd like to add a complication to that even. That right now, but when I was reading this, or when I was listening to it, I remember the book The Gate of the Heart, which talks about the Bob's writings. And the Bob said something very interesting. He said everything, not just human beings, but everything in the universe has two stations: the station of divinity, which is absolute unity, and a station of servitude, which is where all the distinctions lie. And so, yeah, we have a problem with radical individuality, but we also have a problem within the postmodern scheme work, where even collectivism has, the problem with materialism is it only focuses on the station of servitude. So we have right now a bunch of tribalisms, people trying to find, people maybe reacting against the isolation and the self-alienation that comes from individuality, this radical individuality, trying to find a community. But the community itself is only defined in relationship to other communities, right? It's all about what separates us, not what we hold in common. And so this is the complication. Is it's not just that. I think even when we try to turn towards collectivism, we're doing it in the current like intellectual framework. We're doing it in a very destructive way, where we have competing groups who are only looking at the other in terms of their differences. So even collectivism isn't like necessarily a solution to radical individualism in our current situation.
That's a really excellent point. So it's limited, isn't it? It kind of gets back to Chris's, some of the things Chris posted at during our prayer session here and writings prior to this, where you had the Native American quote about being unified and all these other quotes about the importance of unity today. And it's not within your own group, but it's a global type of unity that's much broader, right?
The reason I introduced that is because I really want to introduce the idea into the conversation that ontologically there is, Cortan talked about a couple of meetings ago about duality, and I kind of played on that duality, and you did too as well when you were talking about competition. We were talking about the everything has a positive and negative side. But it's absolutely important for us to remember, or at least the Bob testifies to, the fact that everything belongs to one of its stations is one of divinity, which is an absolute unity. Ontologically, we have to recognize that this oneness, right? It's a violation of just the reality if we don't. So there's a duality. We do have distinctiveness. I'm an individual, you're an individual. But ontologically, we have to understand there's also, I'm at a loss of words of kind of how to explain it, but it's that, that mystical experience of absolute, the old joke of the yogi who goes up to the hot dog stand in Chicago and says, "Make me one with everything." That literally, that we are, that when we deny this, or so I think that's the challenge. The challenge is experientially especially for Baha'is too. We could do good on the conceptual unity.
Yeah. But
how many of us have actually had the mystical experiential confirmation of that? But outside of that, it's just important intellectually, ontologically, everything also shares in the station of absolute divinity. So it's a fiction when you create separateness.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Aaron.
what I,
Ajit? Oh,
oh, I'm sorry. I didn't have my hand raised. I yield to the one who's following the rules.
Following the rules here. Am I?
I see a hand raised.
Okay. I go back to the notion of the collective good, the common good, that used to be so prevalent in many societies and probably even in America years ago, versus this whole thing about rugged individualism and I can do whatever I want to, etc. Live in a free country and I'm totally free. I can do whatever I want to. And I want to go back to Baha'u'llah's idea of total freedom being akin to the freedom of an animal. And in some sense, we have fallen into that kind of mindset. I am absolutely free to do what I want to. And whether you talk about, any of the arguments that are going on in this country, whether I can or should not have a weapon, or you go into any of these arguments. I think in the notion of collective individual freedom and individual rights, we have forgotten the notion of the common good, the notion of the collective good. And the Baha'i faith is telling us that we have to think about the common good versus the notion of the individual rights.
very good points. Averill, did you have a comment?
Oh, I don't know if this adds much. I think what I was going to, Aaron, is his take made me realize that, that I think that there's there could be seen as a hypocrisy on both sides of this individual versus collective thing. Like what, we've got certain, there's this, this strong individualism, rugged individualism, as it's called. There's a blindness in that, and that it ignores all of the progress. It ignores all of the things that we've accomplished by commonweal or by unity. Public roads, public utilities, public school. All of these things. And then what I heard Aaron say is that there's also possibly a hypocrisy among some people in their collectivism, because they're insisting on their version of collectivism, and it gets pitted against other competing groups who believe in collectivism. So there can be hypocrisy on both sides of this polarity, this individualism versus collectivism. I mean, that was just the thought that I heard coming through.
Good point. All right, shall we move on? Or Ajit, you have your hand still up. Or is there?
No, get it down. How do I get my hand down? Once I get my hands up, you're done.
I don't know.
Chris, I can't even find my hand.
It's a retraction of the,
Where's the
retraction
hand?
of the pectoral muscle.
Whatever I said, I take back.
Okay. Who'd like to read this passage?
I'll read it. In a letter addressed to Queen Victoria over a century ago and employing an analogy that points to the one model holding convincing promise for the organization of a planetary society, Baha'u'llah compared the world to a human body. There is indeed no other model in phenomenal existence to which we can reasonably look. Human society is composed not of a mass of merely differentiated cells, but of associations of individuals, each one of whom is endowed with intelligence and will. Nevertheless, the modes of operation that characterize man's biological nature illustrate fundamental principles of existence. Chief amongst these is the unity in diversity. Paradoxically, it is precisely the wholeness and complexity of the order constituting the human body and the perfect integration into it of the body's cells that permit the full realization of the distinctive capacities inherent in each of these component elements. No cell lives apart from the body, whether in contributing to its functioning or in deriving its share from the well-being of the whole. The physical well-being thus achieved finds its purpose in making possible the expression of human consciousness. That is to say, the purpose of biological development transcends mere exist. You need to scroll up. Mere existence of the body and of its parts.
Any comments on that paragraph? So we're moving from the macro level. Baha'u'llah moves us from the macro level to the micro level, sociologically, so that we can basically see how a society actually can be compared to the body. We want to move on, or are there some comments about that? Okay. Want to move on to the next paragraph?
I can read it. What is true of the life of the individual has its parallels in human society. The human species is an organic whole, the leading edge of the evolutionary process. That human consciousness necessarily operates through an infinite diversity of individual minds and motivations detracts in no way from its essential unity. Indeed, it is precisely an inherent diversity that distinguishes unity from homogeneity or uniformity. What the peoples of the world are today experiencing, Baha'u'llah said, is their collective coming of age. And it is through this emerging maturity of the race that the principle of unity and diversity will find full expression. From its earliest beginnings in the consolidation of family life, the process of social organization has successively moved from the simple structures of clan and tribe through multitudinous forms of urban society to the eventual emergence of the nation state, each stage opening up a wealth of new opportunities for the exercise of human capacity.
Any comments?
Well, can I make a comment? I can't find where my hand is to raise it.
You could just do that.
Oh,
That'll
okay,
work.
good. You can see. Okay. Well, I was thinking about the collective. I mean, this is a political issue, and it's not necessarily one that we can solve. But a lot of time, through the decades, when people have talked about the collective or the common good, that kind of thing, there's been groups that have labeled that as communist. And that has always detracted from the real meaning of the collective good or the common good. And I think we still face in general, the world faces that same issue today, with this growing distrust of Russia and China again. And I don't know if there's maybe a more, I guess for us, we'd have to think of a very thoughtful way of expressing this to other people, without getting that, oh, that's a communist idea backlash.
Aaron.
I think that's an excellent point. I mean, I think, part of the problem politically, and this not only goes with communism, but it also goes to kind of Chris's point. On the other hand, the kind of traditionalism that roots itself in radical individualism is the problem of materialism, right? I mean, so we're bringing a so even when you're talking to Christians who are, a certain segment of Christians would be absolutely terrified about the Baha'i faith's interest in promoting a global community, because they have really looked at that, through the lens of the materialisms that have promoted it in the 20th century, like communism. We're not promoting a utopia that's based on our own merits. We're still talking about the only way that we can bring to bear the unification of the planet is through the grace of God, is through surrender through the grace of God in our own lives. I wish I had some quotes ready about, that Abdu'l-Baha backs up the fact that we have to, just like in Christian theology, it's, and that's what's scary, I think, politically for a lot of people, is because utopias, when they're rooted in the sinfulness of men, never pan out, right? It's like, so I think that, but there's a book called Inventing the Individual, The Origins of Western Liberalism by Larry Sedentop. And he talks about in there, it's really interesting because he goes back to the origins of Greco-Roman society or Greek society, which is very much like the origins of society everywhere, where they used to bury the patriarch in the house. And you see this in the Old Testament where you worship the family gods. And so there was this complete collectivism. People didn't have individual identities. They belonged to their family. They're individual. I mean, the psychology of growing into an individual. And so in this book, he talks about how Paul and Christianity was the blossoming of that individuality. And now we're moving from the individualism to an interdependence. And I think that's the other important point to the important aspect of Laura's point too, is that this is just a necessary stage in maturation.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, just and Chris, you probably can speak to this far more eloquently than I do, even though your specialty is in older people. I'm sure that, as a child grows up, they have to become an individual. They have to develop an ego, which then becomes problematic. Right. And then they have to solve the ego's problem in ever increasingly complex ways. But all of this then goes back to the fundamental spiritual truth, or what I would assert is the spiritual truth that the Bob told us about the fact that everything, trees, plants, your dog, your computer screen, everything, he didn't just say living things, everything shares in this duality of a station of divinity and a station of servitude. I mean, that is a radical change in worldview that's necessary to get us to where we need to be to actually overcome, I'll just call it the insistent self. I joined, Curtis is not here today, but, they recommended the book, The Insistent Self. which I started reading. I ordered and I started reading it, and it is really profound, because we as Baha'is don't really often talk about, we don't have the brimstone, but it's scary to realize how selfish our motives actually are, how insistent the insistent self is, and how almost impossible it is to overcome the insistent self, and how that takes away from all of our goodness. You know, it's like,
Yep.
I don't want to call it the dark side of Baha'i, but it's, you know, it's really like, you know, a lot of times we present the gentle side, but this is where it said, hey, our actions aren't good enough. But you only get there through the grace of God. So that's a lot of complex points, but, you know, we can't do it by it. You know, it was one of the, it was, I forget his name, Dunbar, ex-universe, or the former Universal House of Justice. He talked a lot about self-surrender to God, and even in our own lives. I mean, habitual sin. We don't talk about that much. I mean, that's more of a Christian kind of theological thing. But we all wrestle with habitual sins. And the point is, we can't take care of them ourselves. We are powerless to be good. Only through the grace of God. Only when you get to that point where you see, where you plead with Baha'u'llah, take this away from me, because I'm incapable of doing it. And then that's related to the commonness of the good, because it's the surrender of the ego. It's the recognition of not only the divine spirit within us, but also the inadequacy of our individuality. Or, you know, and then that goes to Laura's point. You know, I'm sorry if it's too much, it's all interconnected. And the fear of materialism, which is basically, you know, the problem with the Marxist collectivism, is that it basically turns into a lust for egotistic power through the manipulation of the collective. It's not really a genuine collective. So what we're offering the world is a genuine collectivism. But I think, to your point, Laura, how do we make that point to other people?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I'm sorry for the length of that. It's just, there's a lot. There's so much.
Yeah, there is. Thank you, Aaron. Ajit.
Yeah, quickly to Laura's point, there is an oratorio that all Christians go to church and sing at Christmas. Mendel's Messiah. And they sing about the coming of Christ. And they say his name shall be wonderful, the counselor, the Prince of Peace, etc., etc., etc. And then they say the kingdom shall be upon his shoulder. Speaking from Isaiah here, the kingdom shall be upon his shoulder. Whenever this whole issue of world government, one world comes up, I ask the question, how many governments do you think will be on Jesus' shoulder, one or many? And invariably, the Christians are not aware that that is true. Invariably, Christians are not aware that a basic Christian belief is the coming of the one fold and the one shepherd. And in my mind, my limited way of thinking, this one fold and one shepherd implies nothing less than the oneness of mankind.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, there is a basic inherent belief within Christianity about the oneness of mankind. And we Baha'is ought to tell them, we believe in the oneness of mankind. So do you, Mr. Christian, Mrs. Christian, because you believe in the one fold and the one shepherd also.
Yeah,
Having said that, I need to leave. I have.
It's a very good point. Yeah, so what we see in Baha'u'llah is a reinforcement of things that have been said before, right? And yet there are some new ideas for this day and age, and one of them is the oneness of humankind. Okay, can we go on to the next paragraph?
All right, I'll read this. Clearly, the advancement of the race has not occurred at the expense of human individuality. As social organization has increased, the scope for the expression of the capacities latent in each human being has correspondingly expanded. Because the relationship between the individual and society is a reciprocal one, the transformation now required must occur simultaneously within human consciousness and the structure of social institutions. It is in the opportunities afforded by this twofold process of change that a strategy of global development will find its purpose. At this crucial stage of history, that purpose must be to establish enduring foundations on which planetary civilization can gradually take shape.
Wow. Okay. Any comments on that, or shall we move on? Okay.
I mean, I do think it's, can you scroll back up, Chris? It just had there's something in here that kind of underlines a point that was made earlier, but this first sentence, first two sentences, I guess, about, you know, we have so much individuality now. Just thinking in terms of the things I do, like writing and music, and those things, I'm able to spend so much time doing those things because of the advances we've made collectively, because of the technological advances. And we were talking about bird photography early on. I mean, none of the things that I do, whether it's music or writing or publishing or photography, any of those things that I consider to be individualistic joys in my life could have been achieved if I were still hunting and gathering, and if there hadn't been any collective progress within civilization. So it's just an interesting false choice, I guess I would say, between this individuality and collective progress. And the more collective progress we've made, the greater the individual expression and leisure, frankly, leisure time we've had to achieve it. So I hadn't thought of that before.
Yeah, I had an interesting confirmation of the power of Baha'u'llah when we call upon his name this week. My wife and I have had a less than positive situation with a contractor, and we had to mutually decide to exit this contractor. And before we had our exit meeting, I asked Baha'u'llah, because Baha'u'llah says that if we ask in his name to soften the heart of somebody in a situation of conflict, that will come to pass. And so we prayed for the contractor before the meeting to soften his heart. And actually, when the meeting occurred, there was a total metamorphosis in this individual. I don't know whether that was the power of the Holy Spirit, where that came from, but Roxanne and I just could not believe it, how that actually happened. And he was willing to do all these extra things before he departs from our project. And this has happened so many times, so that, this type of power can be called upon, with an individual that you may be having conflict. Conflict is not bad. It's ubiquitous. And so I'm one of the ones that likes the idea of conflict, but that's handled constructively. And part of that is this struggle for his needs and our needs, individuality versus on both sides. But then there's a collective sort of situation as well. And you know, he's had a lot of injuries this past year and different things that we've been very patient with. So we've tried to recognize his needs. But I think he realized also that he's kind of over his head in this project. And so, you know, he's moving on to something that's going to better his needs, and we're going to move on to something that's going to better our needs. Sometimes that has to happen in order for both souls, all these souls, to grow through this process of conflict. Aaron?
I just want to, to Averil's point, did I pronounce that right, Averil?
It's Averill.
Averil.
You're closer than most.
Averil. The thing is, you see, I have a huge advantage in being able to read a lot. Going back to the invention of the individual, this is not as radical, but one thing I've been doing lately is I've been going through this cultural backgrounds study Bible. And John Walton is an evangelical Old Testament scholar. But what he talks about a lot in a series of books he's written is what he calls the ancient Near East cognitive environment. And it's very interesting because it's a completely different worldview. They, and reading the Bible through that lens. I mean, first of all, it illuminates so much that you might read in the Old Testament. You say, well, that just seems crazy because you're judging it by your own standards, But going back to the fact that this early world pattern seemed to be patriarchal all over the world, and that the idea was, and no doubt from our perspective, taught by a manifestation, that people died and they became able to influence the spiritual world. So ancestor worship, even in the Bible, where we might think that they're like when Rebecca takes her father's household gods, we may feel like that is idolatry, but from their perspective, it wasn't, because they weren't worshipped in the same way that God is worshipped. Rather, what that created was a problem for the family, because people had to be taken care of. I mean, in the people who passed on had to be taken care of by the people who were here. So it's a totally different way of world and a way of thinking. And what this speaks to is it speaks to our global maturation and all the different stages that we have gone through. And as Baha'is, we have an advantage because we have all the world's spiritual scriptures to learn from. And we can see, every stage, and again, going back to Chris's expertise in the development of a human person as they go through all the different stages of life. I mean, essentially, that's what we're talking. We're talking about our integration, our need for interdependence, the metaphor of the body, which is, the reality that the world is deeply, deeply interconnected and integrated, but also that before we can get there as human beings, because we've been made in the image of God, we had to come to an individuality. But not to go back to that, I just wanted to point that out. If anybody's interested, this cultural background study Bible, very, very interesting, because it's kind of a 2-for-1. You can get into it to understand what, 2,000 years ago, what the mentality was, this ancient Near East cognitive worldview, and how totally different it was than our worldview, at the same time that you're learning about, these ancient scriptures that, continue poetically and symbolically to inform our faith and to inform us of the deeper spirituality or spiritual reality.
Thank
Can you
Aaron.
put that author in the chat,
Sure.
please,
sure,
Darren? Thank
absolutely.
you.
Thank you. Well, let's move on to the next paragraph.
I can read.
Sure.
Laying the groundwork for global civilization calls for the creation of laws and institutions that are universal in both character and authority. The effort can begin only when the concept of the oneness of humanity has been wholeheartedly embraced by those in whose hands the responsibility for decision-making rests, and when the related principles are propagated through both educational systems and the media of mass communication. Sorry, I'm reading on my phone, it's a little small. Once this threshold is crossed, a process will have been set in motion.
Covered your microphone a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
There you go.
Once this threshold is crossed, a process will have been set in motion through which the peoples of the world can be drawn into the task of formulating common goals and committing themselves to their attainment. Only so fundamental a reorientation can protect them too from the age-old demons of ethnic and religious strife. Only through the dawning consciousness that they constitute a single people will the inhabitants of the planet be enabled to turn away from the patterns of conflict that have dominated social organization in the past and begin to learn the ways of collaboration and conciliation. The well-being of mankind, Baha'u'llah writes, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established.
Wow. Okay, Aaron, did you have your hand up? Or
No, I,
that was left up. Okay.
oops.
All right. Any
Sorry, I never took
comments
it down.
on this paragraph? Laura?
Yeah, so I think, this goes back to, and maybe, maybe the analogy here might be racism, that, we've put all sorts of laws in place to combat racism, and yet it still exists. And so I think, here Baha'u'llah is making the point that this sense of the oneness of humanity must be, within the vast majority of people on the planet before, maybe not before, I think it'll probably go the same way where we've already started laying international laws and all that kind of thing out, but we're still having all these conflicts. And so, this, once we get to the point where the vast majority of humanity have taken this oneness of humanity concept within themselves, then it will be a lot easier to go ahead and build a global civilization. So, I mean, it makes it kind of clear, for us as Baha'is anyway, to try and spread this idea. And as it unfolds, it's just kind of naturally, organically going to grow into a world community.
Yeah, I have to share with you, I was asked one summer to do a summer school in Northern Ireland, and when we were living in Scotland. So they have a wonderful summer school there, in Belfast. And the Baha'i couple I was staying with gave me a tour of Belfast, and I saw a wall that was higher than a house that divided Catholic from Protestant neighborhoods. and then as I was going down the street, there was this big sign, a big billboard that showed all these boys that were murdered that U2 sings about in Bloody Sunday, that wonderful song by U2. And it just kind of reminded me that of a paper I'd written on the conflicts in Northern Ireland way back in college, because I always wondered why Christians couldn't get along. And you see the current situation, of course, of there's over 35,000 different Christian denominations currently. 35,000 and growing daily. Different sects, cults, new religious movements within Christianity alone. So it's a complex problem that has gone on for several hundred years. And it's a mixture of different religion and political differences, where the Protestants have their British flags up on their neighborhoods, and the Catholics have their Irish flags. So there's that political mixed with the religious. And then you have the Baha'is that have created interfaith groups that's a very, very popular thing now that's growing in Belfast. So we actually had an interfaith choir at that summer school that we were involved in. So I'm thinking there's hope now here, as you know, we understand that the unity of humankind is so important, and it transcends these ethnic and these religious, economic, and political conflicts that have gone on for so long, right? So it's the well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unobtainable until what? Unity is established. And this is what these little baby steps that are being taken across the world are happening, in my view.
Right. The phrase that occurs to me is Rome wasn't built in a day, and ethnic and religious strife wasn't built in a day either. I mean, we're trying to undo, you know, at least 10,000 years of habits of mind, and we're about 150 years into this project. So when I get down and I get pessimistic about the conflict that I see around us, and thinking that, well, things are never going to change, like your example of Protestants and Catholics in Belfast, you have to step back and look at the magnitude of the problem, and recognize the progress that has been made in the last 100 years, and then that gives you the strength to go on, and the hope that we're actually trending in the right direction.
Dorothy.
Hi, yeah. One thing that I noticed, I lived in Ireland for 4 years, in the Republic of Ireland, and the southern part, the larger part, that is a nation unto itself, and the people there, it's funny, but they often refer to themselves as Catholic Baha'is or Protestant Baha'is. Yeah, but living there among both those groups out in the countryside where we lived outside of Limerick, it was very interesting to hear from the neighbors and the people that we knew, Baha'is and others, about the feeling of being a Catholic. It was very much like being African American decades ago in America. It was just being, the way one was treated was so horrendous. You know, to sleep on the porch like a dog across the front stoop of your Protestant employer's home to protect their home. You know, it's just unbelievably harsh and unkind. And lately, as we all have had lately, some tests and difficulties with all that's been going on. And one thing that it's done for me has been to make me recognize that, you know, I thought I was not free of prejudice, but I hoped that I was somewhat free of prejudice. And I certainly kept an eye out for prejudice in my own heart. But now that my husband recently died, and now I suddenly see everyone as being absolutely one with me, you know, the grocery store checker or whoever, you know, someone very high in the social scale or someone very low in the social scale, because we all suffer. And it's that's what's so beautiful about what's happening now, I think, is when we're all in pain, suddenly we can love one another in a new way, even those of us who thought that we were free of prejudice before. I don't know if that's relevant, but just in my heart.
Yeah, the pain, that's an interesting idea, how pain can actually cause gain.
I'm not sure if everybody is familiar with, I'm sorry, I should probably but I'm not sure if you're familiar with the story of the Buddha, that and the woman that came to him after she had lost her child. And she was in terrible grief, and she asked the Buddha to relieve her suffering. And the Buddha said, you know, gave her a task to go around and find a house that was free of loss. So she went around trying to find somebody who was free of loss, and she couldn't do it. And that brought her to this realization, this commonality to what Dorothy was saying. And I thought that was very beautiful, you know, testimony Dorothy gave.
Yeah, that was the Buddha's specialty, was basically referring to the commonality of suffering in life, and how most of us really want to avoid suffering, right? We don't pray for tests. I told Roxanne the other day, we were thinking about it. We're always praying for help with problems, you know, that we're faced with tests. And I said after that meeting with the contractor, you know, we need to say a prayer for thankfulness, gratitude, that his heart was softened as a result of Baha'u'llah. Amazing. I mean, we don't have to look for people walking on water at these types of miracles. These types of miracles happen every single day. And just asking Baha'u'llah to intervene. I'm just amazed by the power that these prayers can give us. So we've kind of run out of time here. Are there some concluding comments some people want to make about any of what we've learned this morning?
Can I make a side comment?
Yeah.
I just realized who Dorothy is, I think. Did your name used to be Dodie Freeman by any chance?
Yes, my middle name is Freeman. I remarried about 30 years ago and added Gilstrap. And my nickname has been Dodie ever since I was a little kid.
You were partially responsible for me becoming a Baha'i in Austin in 1980.
No.
You and Riaz came down from Dallas every week or so for many weeks and did the personal transformation deepening. And by the end of that deepening, I was ready to sign the card.
Thank you. Thank you for telling us that.
Thank you.
Oh, Laura, so beautiful. Well, we're sisters.